My name is Renata Kessler. Everyone calls me Ren. I'm 30 years old, and I price risk for a living. I sat at my sister's kitchen table with a $340,000 mortgage refinance package in front of me, a notary stamp waiting 3 feet away, and one blank signature line with my name typed underneath it. My sister Blair slid a pen across the table and said the same 4 words she'd used on me 8 years ago. "It's just a formality, Ren." But here's what she didn't know. I wasn't the 22-year-old she'd stolen $42,000 from anymore, and the paper in front of me wasn't the one she thought she was asking me to sign. Welcome back to The Quiet Ledger, where we tell true-to-life stories about the moment a quiet person stops absorbing the cost of everyone else's choices. If you've ever been the responsible one in a family that only noticed you when they needed something, this story is for you. Drop your city and the local time below. I read every single one. And if you want to see exactly how this played out, hit subscribe now because you will not want to miss the ending. Let me take you back 8 years, to the spring I turned 22, and the account my grandfather built for me before I even understood what a dollar was worth. I grew up in Millbrook, a town with one stoplight and a hardware store my father, Gordon, ran for 30 years. My mother, Faye, kept the books for the store and kept the peace in the house, which in our family were the same job. We weren't poor, we weren't rich. We were the kind of family where the good dishes came out twice a year and everyone knew exactly why. My sister Blair is 8 years older than me. Growing up, Blair was the show and I was the stagehand. Blair got a car for her 16th birthday, a used Civic with a bow on it in the driveway, photographed from 4 angles. I got my grandmother's old bicycle with a new coat of paint, and I was told to be grateful the chain didn't stick anymore. Blair got a going-away party when she left for State University, 40 people in the backyard, a banner that said, "Future is bright." I got a card. Inside the card, in my mother's handwriting, it said, "We're proud of you too, Ren," in a way that told me the sentence had been added because someone remembered I existed. My grandfather, Walter Kessler, was the one person who saw me clearly. He'd been an actuary himself, 40 years at a mutual insurance company 2 towns over, and he liked numbers the way other grandfathers liked fishing. When I was 14, he opened a custodial account for me under the Uniform Transfers to Minors Act, $42,000, funded from the sale of a rental property he'd owned since before I was born. He sat me down at his kitchen table, the same kind of oak table Blair would put a mortgage package on 16 years later, and he explained exactly what a custodial account was. "This money is yours the day you turn 18, he told me. "Nobody gets to spend it but you." He said it like a rule of physics, not a rule of trust, because in his mind, the two were the same thing. There was one detail he got wrong, and it's the detail this whole story turns on. My grandfather was 71 that year, and he wanted a backup custodian named on the account in case something happened to him before I came of age. He didn't pick my father, because my father had co-signed a business loan 2 years earlier, and Walter didn't trust the timing. He picked Blair. She was 22, freshly graduated, responsible on paper. It was a formality, he told my mother, just in case. By the time I turned 16, my grandfather's heart had started giving him trouble, and Blair had quietly become the custodian of record on an account worth $42,000. I didn't know the mechanics of any of this at the time. I was 16. I was worried about geometry homework, not fiduciary duty. My grandfather died the winter I turned 17. At the funeral, I remember Blair standing very close to my father, the two of them talking in low voices near the coat check. I didn't think anything of it. Grief makes people huddle. I understand now they weren't huddling, they were making a plan. The betrayal happened in stages, quiet enough that I didn't see the shape of it until it was finished. The spring I turned 22, I went to open the account for the first time as an adult, ready to use it exactly the way my grandfather intended, to pay off the last 2 years of student loans I'd taken out, because nobody had told me the custodial account existed yet. The balance was $1,140. I called the brokerage. A representative named Carol read me the transaction history over the phone, and I wrote every line down on the back of an envelope because some part of me already knew I'd need the record. 4 withdrawals over 3 years, a down payment on a townhouse, a wedding deposit, a used Lexus, a vacation to Turks and Caicos. Every withdrawal signed by the custodian of record, Ren Kessler. I called Blair that night. I didn't scream. I asked her, calmly, what happened to the money? She was quiet for a moment, and then she said the sentence I would hear again 8 years later, word for word. It's not stealing if it's family, Ren. I was going to pay it back. You didn't need it yet anyway. I called my parents next. My father sighed the sigh he saved for problems he'd already decided not to solve. Your sister's had a hard few years, Ren, he said. Do you really want to make this into a whole thing? My mother's contribution was shorter and somehow worse. She said, family helps family. I hung up the phone and sat on the floor of my apartment for a long time, and I made a decision that would define the next 8 years of my life. I decided I would never again be the kind of person who found out about a decision after it had already been made about my own money. I want to pause here and ask you something. Has a family member ever used the word family as a weapon, like it was supposed to end the conversation instead of start one? Tell me in the comments, because I think more of us have lived this than we admit. And if you haven't yet, this is your sign to hit that subscribe button, because the next part of this story is where I stopped being quiet and started keeping records. I didn't have $42,000 anymore. What I had instead was a decision. I was going to build a life so financially precise that nobody could ever again spend a dollar of mine without my signature on it, literally or figuratively. By year 1, I finished my student loans on a payment plan I built myself, spreadsheet by spreadsheet, using a part-time job at an insurance brokerage answering phones for $14 an hour. By year 2, I'd passed my first actuarial exam, Exam P, on a Saturday morning I remember specifically because I skipped my cousin's engagement party to study for it, and nobody in my family noticed I wasn't there. By year 3, I'd passed 2 more exams and moved into an entry-level actuarial analyst role at a regional insurer, salary $58,000, and I opened my own brokerage account that no one else's name would ever touch. By year 4, I was promoted to associate actuary, and I started doing something I never told anyone about. I began quietly documenting every financial interaction I had with my family, every request, every loan, every favor asked. Not out of paranoia, out of habit. Underwriters keep files. I was becoming an underwriter of my own life. By year 6, I'd passed my fellowship exams and taken a senior underwriting role at a mortgage insurance company. Salary $104,000, plus a bonus structure I finally understood well enough to negotiate myself. I bought a small condo with a 20% down payment I'd saved in cash, and I put the deed in my name only. No co-signers, no exceptions. By year 7, my grandfather's old attorney, a careful, silver-haired woman named Diane Ostrowski, who had drawn up the original custodial account, retired and merged her small practice into a larger firm downtown. I didn't think much of it when I got a form letter announcing the merger. I filed it in a drawer with 100 other pieces of paperwork I didn't yet know mattered. I hadn't spoken to Blair in nearly 3 years by then. Not out of drama, just out of distance. We exchanged a birthday text once a year, the kind you send because a calendar reminder went off, not because you meant it. My parents called on holidays. I answered. I was pleasant, and I never once brought up the $42,000, because I had learned that bringing it up only ever got me the same 4 words back. It's not stealing if it's family. The call that reopened everything came on a Tuesday evening in March, 8 years almost to the month after that first phone call with Carol at the brokerage. Blair's name lit up my phone screen for the first time in over a year. I almost didn't answer. Her voice was warm in a way I didn't recognize, rehearsed in a way I did. Ren, hi, it's been way too long. I've been thinking about you so much lately. She asked about my job, my condo, whether I was seeing anyone. 3 questions in a row before she'd even told me why she was calling. I've learned that people who actually want to catch up ask one question and wait for the answer. People who want something ask 3 questions fast and don't listen to any of them. Then came the second message, 2 days later. A text this time. And this is the one that told me everything. Hey, so this is kind of random, but Trevor and I are refinancing the house, and there might be some old paperwork with your name on it from way back. Nothing major, probably just a formality. Can we grab dinner soon and I'll explain? Old paperwork with my name on it. I read that sentence 4 times. I am, by profession, a person who reads paperwork for a living, and I have never once in 8 years believed the phrase, probably just a formality, when it comes out of my sister's mouth. I didn't respond right away. Instead, I did what I do at work when a claim doesn't add up. I went looking for the source document. I called Diana Strowski's old office, the firm that had absorbed her practice. I explained I was a former client's granddaughter and asked, purely as a formality of my own, whether any records existed under my grandfather's estate that might list me as a party of interest. The paralegal who answered put me on hold for 11 minutes, and when she came back, her voice had changed. "Ms. Kessler," she said, "I actually have a note here that Diane flagged this file personally before she retired. There's a promissory note and a recorded lien with your name as the holder of record. Would you like copies sent to you?" I sat very still in my kitchen holding the phone. I had no memory of signing anything, because I hadn't. I was 22 when this apparently happened, 3 months after I discovered the $42,000 was gone. The documents arrived 4 days later in a manila envelope, and reading them was the first time in 8 years I understood what my grandfather had actually done in the final months of his life. He hadn't just noticed the withdrawals. He'd caught them in real time, the spring before he died, and he'd confronted Blair directly. Rather than report her, because reporting your own granddaughter felt impossible to a man like Walter Kessler, he'd made her sign a promissory note for the full $42,000, secured by a recorded second lien against the townhouse she'd just bought with the down payment money. The note named me, not himself, as the payee, structured through a small family trust his attorney drew up in the same week. He'd made sure that even after he was gone, the debt would still belong to the person it was actually owed to. I don't think Blair ever fully understood what she signed that year. I think she believed, the way people believe what's convenient, that the note was old paperwork that would quietly expire, that grief and time would bury it the way the funeral had buried the conversation. She was wrong. Liens don't expire because you stop thinking about them. They sit on a title, patient, waiting for the next refinance, the next sale, the next moment someone runs a title search. That moment had just arrived. Blair and her husband Trevor were refinancing their mortgage, and a title company had pulled the property's full chain of title, the way title companies always do, and found a recorded second lien for $42,000 with 6% simple interest, still unsatisfied, 8 years old, held by a name Blair had spent 8 years hoping I'd forgotten. At 6% simple interest over 8 years, the note wasn't worth $42,000 anymore. It was worth $61,600. I sat with that number for a long time. Then I called an attorney, not Diane, who'd fully retired by then, but a colleague she'd recommended personally, a real estate and trust attorney named Marcus Feld, with an office 3 blocks from mine. I want to be clear, I wasn't calling to be vindictive. I was calling because I am, by training, a person who does not sign anything until she understands exactly what it does. Marcus laid the mechanics out for me in 20 calm minutes at his conference table. The refinance lender's title company had flagged the second lien as an encumbrance that had to be resolved before closing. Blair needed one of 2 things from me, either a full payoff of the note plus accrued interest, or a signed subordination and release, which would let her refinance around the debt without actually satisfying it. He slid a blank copy of a standard release form across the table. "This is almost certainly what they're going to put in front of you," he said, "and I want you to understand, once you sign this, the debt effectively becomes uncollectible. You'd be releasing your own lien for nothing. I asked him what would happen if I simply said no. He smiled, the way people do when they've been waiting for someone to ask the right question. Then the refinance doesn't close, he said. Full stop. The lender won't fund a loan on a title with an unresolved senior encumbrance in front of it. Your sister needs your signature far more than you need to give it. I drove home that night with the release form folded in my bag, unsigned, and I thought about my grandfather's kitchen table and the sentence he'd said to me when I was 14. Nobody gets to spend it but you. He hadn't just meant the account, I understand that now. He'd meant the decision too. I need to tell you something honest here. Part of me wanted to just sign it. Part of me was so tired of being the responsible one, the documented one, the one who remembers, that saying yes to a room full of relatives felt easier than saying no to them one more time. If you've ever felt that particular exhaustion, the kind where being right feels heavier than being wrong, I want you to know I see you. Drop a comment if that's ever been you. And subscribe, because what I did with that folder is the part of this story that actually changed something. Blair called again the following week to set up dinner. Family dinner, she said. My place. Trevor's cooking. Mom and Dad are coming too, it'll be nice. I said yes. I did not mention the manila envelope, Marcus Feld, or the number $61,600. I wanted to see, one more time, whether my family would tell me the truth before I had to hand it to them myself. I arrived at Blair and Trevor's house on a Saturday evening in April, and the first thing I noticed was the extra car in the driveway that didn't belong to any of us. Inside, at the kitchen table, sat not just Blair, Trevor, my mother, and my father, but a fifth person I didn't recognize, a woman in a blazer with a laptop bag and a small black stamp case set beside her water glass. A mobile notary. My family had brought a notary to a family dinner. The table itself told its own story before anyone said a word. A manila folder sat at the head of the table, the refinance package inside, a pen resting on top of it at a precise diagonal angle, the way you place something you expect someone else to pick up without thinking. My mother had made a lasagna. Nobody was eating it yet. Blair started warm, the way she always starts. So glad you could come, Ren. It means so much to have everyone here for this. Trevor talked for a few minutes about the renovation they were planning once the refinance closed. A new roof, a finished basement, numbers that made it clear exactly how much they were counting on this loan going through. Then my father cleared his throat, the way he does before he's about to say something he's rehearsed. Ren, he said, your sister told us there's some old paperwork holding up the refinance. Something from years ago, from when Grandpa was still with us. We just want to get it sorted so everyone can move forward. I noticed he didn't say what the paperwork was. Nobody at that table said the words $42,000 out loud. They'd all agreed, at some point before I arrived, to talk around it, the way you talk around a stain on a tablecloth you're hoping nobody looks at directly. My mother went next, softer, angling for guilt the way she always did. Ren, your sister's under so much stress with this house. Trevor's job has been unstable. This is a chance for you to really help, to be the bigger person. Family helps family, honey. There it was, the second time in this story, the exact phrase from 8 years earlier, delivered like it had never been used against me before. Blair leaned forward next, and her voice dropped into something almost pleading. It's just a formality, Ren. It's just old paperwork nobody even remembers the details of. You sign it, we close on Thursday, and we can finally put all of this behind us. I want you to notice something about that sentence. She said, nobody remembers the details, to a woman sitting across the table who had spent 8 years memorizing every single one of them. Trevor added his own version, the outsider's manipulation, softer but no less pointed. I know it's awkward, Ren, but honestly, at this point it's ancient history, right? We just want to move forward as a family. I let the silence sit for a moment after he finished. I've learned that silence does more work in a room like that than any sentence I could say. I looked at the folder, I looked at the pen resting on its precise diagonal. I looked at the notary, who suddenly seemed very interested in her own laptop screen. Then I reached into my bag and set my own folder on the table, directly across from theirs. "Before I sign anything," I said, "I think we should all actually look at what this paperwork is. Nobody said the number out loud tonight. I'd like to." I opened my folder and laid 3 documents on the tablecloth, the same unhurried way I'd watched attorneys lay out exhibits my entire career. The promissory note, dated the spring my grandfather died, Blair's signature at the bottom, unmistakable even 8 years later. The recorded lien from the county clerk's office, county stamp and file number clearly visible. And a 1-page interest calculation from Marcus Feld's office, 6% simple interest, 8 years, total balance $61,600. My mother's hand went still on her water glass. My father stared at the number like it might change if he looked at it long enough. Blair's face had gone the particular shade of pale that happens when a person realizes the story they've been telling themselves for 8 years just met the story everyone else can actually read. "This isn't old paperwork nobody remembers," I said. "This is a promissory note Grandpa made you sign the year he caught you taking $42,000 out of my custodial account. He didn't report you. He protected you from that. But he made sure the debt would still belong to me after he was gone. I didn't ask for this note. I didn't even know it existed until 3 weeks ago. But it exists, and it's legally mine, and right now it's the only thing standing between your refinance and closing." The notary quietly closed her laptop. That's usually the sound a room makes when it understands a signing isn't happening tonight. My father recovered first, the way he always does, reaching for control instead of honesty. "This is exactly why we didn't want to make a big thing out of it, Ren. Can't you just sign the release and we settle the actual number privately, as a family?" I want you to notice the shift. 30 seconds earlier, it was old paperwork nobody remembers. Now, suddenly, everyone remembered exactly what it was, and everyone had a plan for how I should quietly make it disappear anyway. "I'm not signing a release tonight," I said. "I'm not signing anything tonight. If you want this resolved, it gets resolved the way any debt gets resolved. In writing, through my attorney, with terms everyone actually agrees to and understands. Not at a kitchen table with a notary nobody told me was coming." Blair's composure went first, cracking into something raw. "You'd really let our house fall through over money that's basically nothing to you now? Look at your condo, look at your job. This would barely make a dent for you." I looked at her for a long moment. "It was never about whether I could afford to lose it," I said. "It's about whether I'm ever again going to sign something because a room full of people decided in advance that I would." Trevor tried logic next, the way people do when emotion has stopped working for them. "The lender's underwriter is going to call Monday for final docs. If this isn't resolved, we lose our rate lock. We lose the whole deal." "I know exactly how underwriting works, Trevor," I said. "It's my job. I price exactly this kind of risk for a living. I'm not the one who put an unresolved lien in front of a closing table and assumed the person holding it would just sign whatever was placed in front of her." My mother started crying then, the practiced kind, the kind that used to work on me at 17 and hadn't worked on me in years. "After everything we've done for you," she said, "we raised you. We gave you a home. You also gave Blair custodial control of $42,000 that belonged to me," I said quietly, "and never once told me it happened until I found the empty account myself. I'm not the villain in this story for remembering that. I'm just the only one in this room who kept the receipts." Nobody said anything for a long moment. My father finally looked at the note on the table, really looked at it, and something in his face changed. Not defensiveness this time, something closer to recognition. He'd known, I realized. He'd known back then and said nothing, the way he'd said nothing on the phone 8 years ago. Watching him see the number in writing seemed to be the first time it had ever felt real to him instead of theoretical. I picked up my folder and I left the release form exactly where it was, unsigned, on top of theirs. "I'll have my attorney reach out to yours by end of week," I said, standing. "If you want to structure a real payment plan, I'm open to that conversation. But it happens on paper, with terms, like any other debt, not over lasagna." I drove home that night and didn't cry, and didn't feel triumphant either. I felt something closer to finished, the particular calm of closing a file that had been open far too long. The refinance did not close that Thursday. Marcus Feld and Blair's attorney spent the next 6 weeks negotiating an actual structured settlement, $61,600, paid over 4 years at a rate we both signed off on, secured properly this time, on paper, witnessed, filed with the county the correct way. Blair and Trevor's original lender let their rate lock expire, and they refinanced 3 months later at a slightly higher rate, a cost that fell entirely on them, not on me. My mother didn't speak to me for 2 months after that dinner. When she finally called, it wasn't to apologize. It was to ask, once, whether I might consider forgiving part of the balance since Blair was under so much stress. I told her no, gently, and she didn't ask again after that. My father surprised me. 6 weeks after the dinner, he called and asked if I'd meet him for coffee, just the two of us. He didn't try to negotiate anything. He sat across from me at a diner booth and said, "I should have told you the year it happened. I let your grandmother's version of keeping the peace become my excuse for not doing the harder thing. I'm sorry, Ren." It wasn't a fix. It didn't erase 8 years. But it was the first fully honest sentence anyone in my family had said to me about any of this, and I let it matter exactly as much as it deserved to. I have a question for you before I finish this one. Have you ever had to put a number, an actual dollar figure, on something your family tried to convince you was too small to mention? I'd genuinely like to know. Tell me in the comments, and if this story means anything to you, hit that subscribe button now, because I post a new one every week, and I promise you, the calm ones hit harder than the loud ones. Here's what 8 years taught me. Family doesn't get to be a word people use to skip the math. If a debt is real, it stays real, whether it's owed to a bank or to your own sister. And the people who tell you it's just a formality are usually the ones who understand exactly how much the formality is worth. They're just hoping you don't. I kept the receipts because my grandfather taught me that numbers don't lie, even when people do. And when the day came that my signature was the only thing standing between my family and what they wanted, I finally understood what he'd built for me all along. Not just an account, not just a lien. Leverage, built quietly, on paper, years before I ever knew I'd need it. That's my story. 1 signature, 8 years, and a debt nobody thought I'd remember. If it made you think about your own family, your own paperwork, your own worth, share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Drop a comment, hit subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.